be grateful for your suffering. There's always going to be someone who's suffering more. There's always going to be someone in a worse situation than you. No matter how grim things may be, someone is suffering worse. You nor I may not even be able to conceive the amount of suffering that person is going through. But they do exist. They face extreme pain. So be grateful that you do not. And from this, imagine that you're in front of them and you're complaining about your own suffering. How do you think they would feel? Even worse, what if they reassured you about your suffering? What would you feel? Guilty, disgraceful, ashamed. You can say, oh, I'll never do that. Oh, I'll never be the type of guy who is complaining to someone who is suffering more. But is that really true? How many times have you complained to your friends? How do you know that they didn't suffer a worse day than you? How do you know? You don't. When you're suffering, most, if not all of us, will spite it. But spite doesn't help. It certainly doesn't help you. It doesn't help the people around you. It actually makes it worse for those who care about you. Because when you're taking care of someone who is suffering and they are spiteful, they are angry, you can see how much pain they're going through. You can see how consumed they are by their suffering. And that's painful. In which spite will make your suffering worse. It will. The thing is, you're going to suffer regardless if you choose to. But you can choose your outlook on that. You can choose to be spiteful or grateful. Either one honestly doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of the universe. But to you personally, why not choose something that's beneficial to other people, beneficial to yourself, and your own happiness? Spite also fuels your despair because essentially your spite is your decision of your suffering. So like the more anger you feel, the more despair you'll feel because you're angry that you can't do anything to prevent your suffering. And after anger comes the realization, or perhaps you're angry because of the realization, but either way you have the realization that you can't do anything about it. And so despair comes in. Speaking of the universe, you're insignificant compared to the universe. That's kind of... It can be taken as nihilism, but I believe the concept is from Stoicism, or at least where I learned it from. And what the Stoics meant with it was that be indifferent to everything. Be indifferent to pain, to pleasure, everything. I can see why people will say that's extreme, and well, there is a sort of more lenient category of Stoics where there are preferred indifference, so it's still the same above image of like just everything's indifferent, but there are preferred indifference, so like preferred indifference, pleasure, positivity. Well, pleasure depends on what kind of pleasure. Positivity also depends. In generality, like things that are societal good, having money, having purpose, those stuff are preferred indifference. And then there's dispreferred indifference, like pain, that stuff. So, in all, they all are indifferent. But if a Stoic were to choose one or the other, they would choose the preferred indifference, essentially. Anyway, going back to the universe, you don't even live long enough to be a noticeable speck in a timeline of the entire universe. And from Stoicism, this is really just about being indifferent to what you do. Or, not exactly what you do, but what happens to you. And it isn't meant to demotivate you. It isn't meant... It's meant to tell you that the negativity that you feel doesn't matter. And I mean, if nothing matters, then you can also say, doesn't positivity matter anyway? Well, yes. And from Stoicism, nothing matters really, because everything's indifferent. But positivity is a preferred indifferent. I would prefer positivity over negativity, because it would make my seemingly meaningless life more enjoyable. So, yeah. And, well, you didn't sign up for suffering. Did you sign up for pleasure? So, why aren't you complaining about that? Well, because it feels good. Yeah. You don't like suffering because it feels bad. Okay. But isn't it because that you can feel bad that you can feel good? I guess, who are you going to blame for creating your existence? Your mother? Your father? Perhaps you have enough spite and anger towards them? For your parents, are you going to blame them for your existence? Are you going to blame them for their existence? Surely they didn't ask to be born. But they were. Same as you. Are they complaining right now? So why are you? Perhaps you're religious or not religious but you feel that it's God to blame. Well, in that case, be grateful that you weren't born in hell.